Hey everybody, it's Fabrizio Aiello, creator of Horace H. Hoover. And today I want to talk about practicing. I know there's a lot of cliched, trite advice given regarding practicing, and I think at face value, it doesn't really help and can actually harm you to some degree. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of my journey regarding my views on practicing and how I used to regard practicing and how I regard it today. So I think everybody starts out this way, but it could just be me. Hopefully, somebody will get some use out of this. When I first started drawing, really started drawing, not, as a child, I went straight to the final pencils. I would start with the bicep and then into the chest and into the head. There was no gesture drawing, and you go right into the final pencils. Same thing that happens to me happens to everybody else. Maybe the bicep looks great, and you get to the shoulder and that looks okay, and then you get to the neck and you mess it up and you throw the drawing away. So you scrap it, grab another piece of paper, finished pencils. Okay, we'll start with the neck this time. Hey, I nailed it. Into the chest and the bicep. Hey, that looks great. The waist, totally messed it up. Toss it, start over. And for me, this is a long time ago, so I didn't really have YouTube and a lot of the advice that you can find all sorts of places now. And I kind of came to the conclusion on my own that I needed to practice more because I was just sick and tired of tossing these drawings. I would be so happy with a portion of it, and then I would get to another part and I just couldn't finish it. So I started to practice. Now we can fast forward a little bit. I went to college, learned anatomy and perspective and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, college was mostly what I would consider practicing. There wasn't a lot of finished drawing. They were very quick gestures to longer gestures, but not the refined detail. So what happened to me is I kind of got stuck in this loop of practicing, and that's all I would do. I would practice anatomy. I would learn all the bones, all the muscles, the origins, the insertions, and then I would switch to perspective, and not just superficial, 2-point, 3-point. I'm talking measuring points, architectural drawings, really deep dive into every single topic I could think of. Mostly human anatomy, perspective, and things like that. But I just got stuck. I just kept practicing and practicing, and I never really finished anything. And it wasn't until I started finishing things that I realized that the stuff that you're practicing really has no context. Just because I know the origins and the insertions of the muscles, whenever you're given a piece of a story, especially a comic book, all of a sudden, those origins and the insertions aren't nearly as important. Maybe out of 30 pages, you have one panel where that becomes an issue. Meanwhile, you've spent hundreds of hours learning and poring over all those anatomy charts and drawings. Maybe it's something like, necessity is the mother of invention. What you're producing necessitates what you practice. And maybe that's a good way to think of it, because whenever I finish a drawing or an issue, what I do is I kind of review struggles I had with that last drawing. Now, I will say this, I do finish the drawing. I mean, unless it is absolutely extreme, I finish every single drawing. I work my way through every rough part. If I have to erase a million times, I erase a million times. There are parts that I might not be particularly happy with, but you have to look at it as a whole, and you can't look at it as a whole until the drawing's done. So it's a promise I make myself that I will finish every drawing, and at the very end, if I still hate the drawing, I might not share it, I might file it away, but even so, it's rare that I would just toss the drawing now. Now granted, it's taken a long time to get to that point. I realize when you're still struggling with everything, it feels better just to toss the drawing, because that's just a reminder of a failure. Now, as far as how I approach practicing now, what I do is I produce, I would say, 3 or 4 hours a night, and I set aside practicing. But it's very directed practicing. It's not just filling sketchbooks with faces, working on anatomy, unless that is something that I need to work. So for example, if in issue 2 I had trouble with the triceps or something like that, then I will very much pull out my anatomy books, go over everything again. But all of my practicing is really directed practicing. And because if not, again, you will spend your time practicing things that you may never have to draw. So at minimum, things you have drawn, you probably will draw again. And, before I had done my first comic book, I had no context. I was looking at other people's comic books, other people's characters, but by the time it got to mine, there's virtually no overlap. My favorite artist is, one of them obviously is John Buscema. I'm looking at his Conan comic book. There is zero analog in Horace H. Hoover. So as much as I love John Buscema, studying that stuff isn't quite as beneficial as other artists. So practicing can make imperfect. If you don't want yourself yourself. If you don't get stuck in a loop, and when you do practice, it's very directed and you're very cognizant of what you're practicing and when. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. It sound right, boys. It sound right, boys. It sound right, boy.